but we know that there is a pile of money that's kind of sitting there for customers to take back just by modernizing their infrastructure. However, again, as I stated in the beginning, it sounds a lot easier than it really is when you start digging into all of the things that need to be done to get from point A to point B.
Hey, John, welcome to the Business Line. How you doing, bud?
Good. How's everything, Brian?
Everything's good.
I appreciate you having me on today.
Absolutely. We're super excited to learn more about you and learn about what you're doing, a little bit of background stuff, a little bit of, coming up and seeing what's going on. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Can't complain. Complain. And even if I could complain, right? Everybody's got the problems.
Keep that whining to somebody else, right?
Exactly.
My football coach used to always say, the only person that cares is your mom, and she's not here. So,
well, absolutely. That's true.
So, have you been able to avoid all the sickness that's going around lately? Everybody's coming down with something.
I have, Brian. I have, right? I think I got hit with COVID a little bit at the end of the summer, the beginning of the spring, but since then, right? Knock on some wood, everything's been pretty good.
Nice. And some of that my way. I got young kids, and when they're in school, they always bring home a new present every week.
Right.
So anyway, we'll get away from that.
Christmas every day, right?
Absolutely. So, John, tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I want to spend definitely some time talking about Pinnacle and the awesome stuff you guys are doing, but I want to learn about you first. I want to learn about some of your history. How'd you get to be doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. So I've been in the technology sector for 25 plus years. Back in I have to kind of go back to the mid 90s, right? Right, little thing called bandwidth, right? Exponentially growing on a daily basis. I'm a big believer in supply and demand. I figured this is a great industry to kind of get into, and ever since then, right? I've been I've been in the world of technology for a good part of my career. I worked for large global providers, spent a relatively decent amount of time at Verizon.
Okay.
After my stint at Verizon, I went to a company that was called CenturyLink, kind of
familiar with those guys.
Right? Yeah, Lumen now. Couple acquisitions, couple rebrandings. And during my time with both providers, right, especially at Lumen, I ran large global sales teams. Space was really kind of in that large enterprise global market, right? Working on a lot of technology solutions, right up the proverbial stack, so to speak. And probably about a year and a half ago, had an opportunity to kind of go to a smaller MSP that was experiencing some rapid success and some growth. Company named Think Forward. Give a shout out to the folks at Think Forward, a tremendous MSP. But probably I'd say about five months ago, I received a call from a gentleman I used to work really closely with at CenturyLink, and obviously Lumen. He was director of our advanced services, did a lot with cloud modernization, right? Cloud migrations, and ran the gambit, right? From Google Cloud to Azure to AWS while I worked with him. And we worked on a lot of big projects. But, the way big corporate America works, right? There's a lot of change, right? People go off and do different things. So Rajiv Kamal is his name, went off and went to AWS, right? And was spending a good amount of time at AWS, made a lot of friends there, a lot of connections. And then I got a call from Rajiv, again, several months ago, saying, hey, me and a couple of partners of mine are working on a product, right? Using AI ML. They were all in the AI ML division of AWS, working on different projects, with natural language processing and convolutional neural networks. Again, running the whole gamut, working special projects for customers. And, one thing, right, from a business problem statement, right, one thing that I've seen for years and years and years, and they really experienced over at AWS, is that, folks, have been on a digital transformation, moving to cloud compute, right, for years now, right? One of the business problems is cost, right? I've never heard anybody say, I'm glad I went to AWS or Azure or Google because I'm saving a ton of money.
Right. No.
Quite honestly, right? Most folks think that they're outsourcing their infrastructure by going to the cloud. And reasonable thought is, I'm gonna save money, right? But when they get to the hyperscalers, what happens is, right, they're hit with all these charges. They're hit with egress charges, right? There's all of these hidden fees, and there's a little bit of sticker shock, right? The problem is that once you kind of go to the cloud providers, you're stuck there. Once you do your migrations, it's almost, I use the analogy, right? It's almost like, I want to go on a vacation, right? I'm off to a cruise ship. I think I got a great price for my vacation. I get on the ship, and the next thing you know, all of the fine print, right? They charge me to get in my room. They charge me to get out of my room. Right?
Every time you key in, every time you key out, every time they're tracking it in the chart. That's AWS right there.
Yeah, right on, right. Yeah, right on, right. The problem is that you're on the boat, you're middle of the ocean, right?
You're there. Right. Where are you going to go?
Yeah. So one of the things that's interesting is that, most people treat their cloud environments much like they treat their physical data centers, right? Now, what do I mean by that? I'm in a physical data center. I want to spin up a workload or an application. I go out and I buy a server. I have a server. I physically rack and stack it, right? In a cloud environment, I want to run a workload, right? So I'm not plugging in a physical server. I'm spinning up a virtual server, right? I need data, right? I need database. I need storage. Same thing like in your physical data center, right? The problem is that the hyperscalers have been modernizing their environment for years now, right? The traditional server-based environment, right, is a little bit of a legacy way of doing things.
Sure.
Most of the hyperscalers have gone to serverless environments, right? An ephemeral compute scenario, right? Run a certain workload, drop the workload. Right, we call it function as a service.
Right. Yep.
Considerable cost savings, right? Because I'm not paying for that infrastructure, right? The challenge is that once I'm in that server-based environment, even though I'm within the same hyperscaler ecosystem, making that migration to modernize your cloud infrastructure is not easy. AWS, for example, has over 200 products and services. They have over 400 icons that represent different products, services, features, functions, right? So right from the start, it's a complex environment, right? The cloud today, with all of the SaaS providers, APIs, all of the different products, all of the different services, right? It takes a lot of resource, a lot of investigation, right, just to figure out what products and services I should be using in the cloud that are most efficient to run my workload. I get the best performance, and I get the optimal pricing points, right, where I can actually control my costs. Even if I figure out the right products and services, right, I still need to know, right, what's my cost going to be tomorrow once I migrate to that serverless environment? It's almost like, right, you don't want to replicate the same problem. Customers saying, I'm in a traditional data center, I want to migrate to the cloud, and then there's sticker shock after the fact, right? So anytime somebody's, right, thinking about changing their infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure, is there a little bit of gun shyness, right? I kind of kind of got bit once by the unknown, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's the ROI piece of that. Had the right products and services. I know what my costs are going to be, at least from a budgetary perspective. Well, I still have to visualize this. I still have to, right? I still have to diagram how these products and services work together, right? So I have an understanding of what that workload looks like traversing across my infrastructure. So I got three major problems that I got to hurdle before I can migrate. But I'm not done yet, because I still have to write the Terraform code to be able to implement, right, any changes that I want to make to my infrastructure.
Yep.
Even when I write my Terraform code, I still need the best practices from an implementation guidelines perspective, right? What's the instruction manual? What are the best practices for actually doing this migration from a server-based infrastructure to a more modernized, right, function as a service type of serverless architecture?
Right.
And then finally, Brian, for all of the years that I've been in this business, one thing that I've learned: the people on the technology side of the fence generally speak a different language than the people at the CX level, right?
Of course.
Right, that are running the business, right?
Yep.
So there's often a divide. People are speaking, right? They're speaking different languages to one another. So interestingly enough, when I got a call from Rajiv and some of the other folks that were looking to start Pinnacle AI, they were taking their experiences, obviously, in cloud migrations, cloud modernization, aligning that with their experiences in generative AI and working with foundation models. And really what they've done is, kind of, right, created a solution that actually applies artificial intelligence and machine learning to cloud modernization, right? And they're hence born, right, our flagship product, which we call COM AI, Cost Optimization, Modernization, Advisory, and Implementation. So really the idea is we built a transformer, right? We ingest, right, all of a customer's cloud reports, again, whether they're from AWS, whether they're from Azure or Google Cloud. We run those reports, we run that data through the transformer, and the machine, right, then has a recommendation engine that recommends the right products and services based on the utilization patterns and based on the services that you're running on the cloud. Takes into account all of the non-functional business requirements. What SLAs do I need? Am I in a retail environment? I need to be PCI compliant. Am I a healthcare organization, and do I need to be HIPAA compliant, right? Do I work with the government? Do I need to be FedRAMP compliant, right? So it takes those non-functional business requirements and then make recommendations on what products and services I should use. Does the ROI cost analysis. This is what I'm spending today. This is what your budgetary costs will be tomorrow. Writes the Terraform code, creates the diagrams, right, the architectural diagrams, develops the implementation guidelines based on best practices for products or service migration, right, either into the cloud or within the cloud. And then finally generates what we call a CXO report that essentially breaks down that divide in communication between the technology folks and the business leaders, right? Essentially takes the products and services and then applies, right, business logic to why these products and services have been recommended, what the cost savings are, what the diagram looks like. So that was really the kind of the impetus. Traditionally, Brian, cloud costs have been a problem, right? Escalating out of control cloud costs. And the way that the industry has kind of attacked that problem has been through what we call FinOps, right? Now, FinOps, right, is very valuable. There's no question about that. But FinOps has limitations because in a FinOps environment, really what you're doing is right-sizing your cloud environment. I have 10 instances, and the reality is that I only need 8.
Yep.
Great. I eliminate two, I save some money.
Yep.
Maybe there's a different way that I can extract some files if I'm querying some information, so I can limit my egress charges, right? But you're always going to have data leaks, right? You're always going to be extracting, right? In a relational database, right? You're always going to be extracting more information than you necessarily need, which is going to cause increases, obviously, in those egress charges. So while FinOps is a good strategy for, right, understanding what your cloud utilization is and containing it at the margin, the real cost savings, right, is really in the modernization, right? Being able to take advantage of some of the features and functionality that the providers are offering in a serverless-based environment, right? And not having to pay for that infrastructure, even when you're not using it, right? Mm-hmm. So we kind of noticed that over the years, if people have not modernized, if companies have not modernized their cloud environment in the past 18 to 24 months, the hyperscalers are so far advanced in what they're doing to modernize their offerings. Right off the bat, you probably can save 20 to 30% at a minimum, right? Now, again, case by case basis, right? But we know that there is a pile of money that's kind of sitting there for customers to take back just by modernizing their infrastructure. However, again, as I stated in the beginning, it sounds a lot easier than it really is when you start digging into all of the things that need to be done to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're a relatively small company, and we're constantly doing that on a smaller scale, and it still takes time, energy, and effort that I don't always have, available, whether it's myself, my business partners, or our team, but it's got to be done, right? So it sounds like, if I go back to your beginning of your story a little bit, your business partner that gave you a call, he spoke one language, and he knew you spoke a little bit different of a language. So tell me about that phone call when it came, because this story isn't that much different than myself and my business partner Manish's story and how we kind of got linked up. Because I mean, I didn't know anything about what he was doing. He spoke a little bit of a different language, both literally being Hindi and professionally being in kind of healthcare information services. So anyway, tell me about that conversation that he called you up. It was like, "Hey, John, got a great idea. I need you to sell it." What was that?
Yeah. So, again, it's interesting because, right, when I got a call from Rajiv, and we started, again, just talking about, right, when we worked together in the past, and,
because you were still were you still with the MSP at this time?
I was still with the MSP.
Were you doing correct. Sales kind of with them,
yeah,
kind of helping them grow? Awesome. Yep. Okay,
yep.
Cool.
No question about it.
Don't let me forget about that. I want to talk about that a little bit too down the road, but okay, back to the phone call. Sorry.
Absolutely, right. So when Rajiv had given me a call, obviously time spent catching up and talking about, again, some of the problems and the challenges, right, that we've seen with corporate users of hyperscaler services, right, for some time. Rajiv started telling me a little bit about the work that he was doing at AWS. And he had already started the product was already well into development, a high level conversation sort of went, hey, look, we're a bunch of really smart guys, right? We're data scientists, we're AI engineers, but we're not salespeople, right? So
all the while he's pitching you on this idea, right? He's trying to sell it to you.
Yeah, but didn't have to pitch too hard because, again, it's a
smart guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian, look, I'm a firm believer, right? And this is right, like from a technology standpoint, right? Even working right, within the large service providers, the goal is always to kind of go out and find the business problem and then bring technological solutions to the table on how to solve that business problem, right? So when Rajiv had given me a call, he was laying a business problem out that again, quite honestly, right, is no secret to anybody, especially anybody in the industry, and has gone unsolved, right? Not completely unchecked, but unsolved right? For a long time. So, it was a great opportunity, right? To be a part of something, be a part of the development, be a part, right, of the go to market,
Mm-hmm.
not just with Com AI, but the larger picture, which is really the premise of Pinnacle AI. It's really to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And apply that technology to business problems, right? Where we can work with our customers, really focused on modernizing, optimizing business processes, systems, and services, right? We do a lot in the natural language processing area as well, where we're, again, using foundation models to do things like agent assist, right? Document writing. Again, it still boils down to the premise where we're looking to take AI/ML technologies, right? Apply them to everyday business functions, right? To make them more efficient, make them more modernized, right? Obviously, provide a return on it, provide a return on investment for companies that kind of have been struggling with menial, repetitive tasks, right? That don't necessarily produce repetitive outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Machines can do that, right? They can take that repetitive task and they can produce an outcome, right, that is reliable every time the machine processes that workload.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you said yes right on the call. Did you have to think about it? What was
Well,
your?
I said yes pretty quickly, right? Again, there's, the other part to, right, just where the industry is going in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the concepts of artificial intelligence and machine learning have been around for a long time, right? You can date machine learning back to the 50s,
Yeah.
right? Again, I've used this example on many occasions, right? We all remember Bobby Fischer, right? He played chess against a machine, right? That's
Yep.
machine learning. Phil Hellmuth played poker against a machine, right? So there's nothing new conceptually, right, to artificial intelligence, machine learning, right? It's the data science, right, around getting predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics, so to speak, right? What's changed over the past couple of years are really two things, right? Number one, right, the advent of foundation models, right? So, when we look at companies like OpenAI and ChatGPT-4, OpenAI, right, has been around since 2016, 17. ChatGPT-4 didn't get released until November of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like we've been forever in this generative AI world, but it's still
Hasn't been that long. Yeah.
it's still relatively young, right? From a user experience and from a technology perspective as well, with regards to the foundation models, which allow us to crunch significant amounts, sizable amounts of data at one time that we weren't able to do before. The other event that's happened, right? We see NVIDIA, right? Just blew away earnings call the other day. The chip manufacturers, right, have been able to, over the past couple of years, really to kind of drop the cost of chips and improve again, right, the amount of data they can process.
Mm-hmm.
So we have foundation models coupled with, right, processing power that can take massive amounts of data sets, right, crunch them, and obviously generate output. That hasn't been available, right, up until recently, right, from a technology perspective. The other thing, Brian, is that, look, if you are a Fortune 100 company, you wanted to go to IBM, spend $100 million to run Watson, fantastic, right? But now we're in an environment with chip costs coming down, with foundation models, right? With some of the developments in prompt engineering and retrieval augmented generation, that artificial intelligence it's the great equalizer for the small company,
Mm-hmm.
right? The small company can do things today, right, can automate and can do things intelligently automate, can do things that competitors 100 times their size, right,
Are paying
can do.
hundreds of people to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yep.
So, right, not just Com AI from a product standpoint, but the reality of where the industry is going from a technology perspective. Um, right. Again, as much as I love the people that I've worked with across companies, right, not just my last organization that I was with, the truth of the matter is it was, really just jumping into a market that is that is just at its infancy stage, right? And that's pretty exciting in itself.
Yep. All right, so let's back up a little bit. Part of our business here is an MSP. I love hearing about other MSPs. Tell me about your time with this MSP. Like, did you jump from an ISP kind of thing over to the MSP, or was there some stuff in between? How'd you get linked up with an MSP? Because
it's a different cat. When you're in an industry for look, I'm
probably worked with a lot of MSPs, right?
Yeah, decades, right?
Yeah.
It pains me to say that, Brian, right? When you're in an industry for decades and, you're within a marketplace, right? For the same period of time, a lot of people, right?
Right.
It's even for the Verizons and the CenturyLinks of the world, right? That have vast portfolios. Yes, right. Many times solving the business, right? Being a solutions oriented company, you still have to work with third parties, right? So, there's a lot of folks that I've known. I've worked with these gentlemen for a long time in a partnership relationship. The service provider industry is it's a tough paper route. Yeah, right. It's a tough paper route. When you think of the Verizons and the CenturyLinks and the AT&Ts of the world, they have a really interesting dynamic going on, right? That really doesn't touch a lot of other industries or companies, right? So you got multiple, right? You have multiple masters. Publicly traded companies, you have fiduciary responsibilities to the shareholder. Good portion of the labor is unionized. Right. And the technology, right, the service provider technology network, right, managed services, NPLS, internet, connectivity, right, getting back to the supply and demand, right, that's all been deflationary, right? It's all been from a revenue perspective in a deflationary mode for, again, right, the past 2 decades. So these companies, these companies, I got rising labor costs, right? To run global networks, right? We just look at the cost of power and electricity, right? Yeah. I got rising operational costs, rising labor costs. I have diminishing returns of revenue based on the services that I provide.
Yep.
I'm really going to date myself now. When I start talking about, we would sell a DS3 of connectivity, right? 45 megs. Years and years and years ago, right? Companies would pay $20,000 plus, right? For that amount of bandwidth.
When I broke into doing sales for a small MSP, I was working with, ISPs here locally in Wisconsin. They're selling, and all they sold were T1s, and they were, for a 1.5 up and down T1, a couple $1,000s each, and companies were buying bonded pairs or more and just spending thousands of dollars on slow speeds compared to what they are now, and they only want to pay $100 for that now.
Correct. Right? Correct. Absolutely correct. Right. And then we look at even companies that offer what we refer to as a broadband type of service, whether it's symmetrical or asymmetrical. Right. The speeds that Fios delivers. Right. And some of the cable providers are, right? I mean,
I'm getting a gig up and down at home, and some of my businesses are paying $750 a month for 25 by 25 fiber. Right. So
exactly. Right. So I knew at the end of the day that the service provider world, eventually I would be making, that I'd be making a move. And, I obviously had the opportunity, right? To kind of go to work for people that I knew, I liked,
Mhm.
I respected. Um, and obviously very grateful for the time that I spent there. And, like I said, was not expecting, right, to kind of get the proverbial call right out of the blue, but it came, and a tremendous opportunity had presented itself.
And it's a different type of gig, and it's not an easy gig.
Yeah.
IT managed, and it was IT managed services, right?
Right.
Correct me. Okay,
Yep.
it's not an
Correct.
easy sell.
Yeah.
And different MSPs do it a little bit differently, or they've got different angles and maybe different things that they're including. Tell me about how you went from what you were doing at an ISP provider to an MSP, and the process of successfully closing deals on that side.
So you have to remember the big providers are MSPs as well, right? They just do it
They just do a different type, yeah.
They just do a different type and at a lot larger scale, right?
Yep.
So selling the managed services and being in that managed services provider environment is something that I had been in for years and years and years and years, right? It's just right. Right. They do it a little bit differently, right? And like any big company, where you have layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. My phone is going to ring from people that I used to work with, right? But right, they're going to, right? Like I know I'm going to say something, right? That's going to get me in trouble here.
It's okay.
But
I do that every day. Hey, this is real. Here's why this interests me so much, because it's the business now is different than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
IT managed services has shifted to heavy managed services, all inclusive, flat rate kind of stuff. Tell me about what did you find was the toughest part, the biggest struggle, the biggest thing to overcome, and getting out there and bringing in new clients for Think Forward.
Well, again, I look at at the end of the day, I've always had a little bit different take of sales in general, Brian, to be honest with you, right? I've even, run my sales teams in the past. Look, you go out and you have conversations with people, right? You go out and you have conversations with people. And in those conversations, right, like you learn what their challenges or struggles are, right? What their priorities are, or what their objectives are, right? And then you want to come back to the table with, solutions, right, or services that solve those problems, right? So not so much, right? I don't want to use the word difficult, right? You're just having different types of conversations with folks, depending upon obviously the types of services that you're looking to evangelize.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think in some cases when you come from the Verizons of the world and you come from the CenturyLinks of the world, one of the challenges that they have, right, is adaptability and flexibility, and especially in a managed services environment where the end user, the customer needs they need quick reaction. If they need to make a change to their environment, if they're in a fully managed ecosystem, they don't want or can't afford the 72-hour SLA on making that change, right? That a lot of these big providers require, just because of the bureaucracy that's in place, right? If there is an outage, right? Customers today, this is a 24/7 globally connected world, right? And when you're down an hour, for a lot of companies, even if it's at 2:00 in the morning, there's a loss of revenue associated with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So working with companies that are a little bit more nimble, right, can scale a little bit more quickly, right, and have a little bit greater personal connection. Now, I'm not talking about from the rep or from an account team perspective. I'm talking about from an organization to organization, right, where there's a little bit more of a personal connection, right? In many ways, is a very easy conversation to have.
Sure. Yeah. It's about asking questions, right? Uncovering problems.
Absolutely. There's certain principles that don't really change.
Right, did you know from a young age you're going to be doing sales, or when you were younger, did you kind of get into some other stuff? And
you're going to get into my favorite topip now, Brian. It's funny.
Let's go. Let's go.
I just had this conversation. I just had this conversation the other day. Now I'm a little bit biased, but I'll tell you, and I will argue this till the cows come home. Sales is the most difficult job in the face of the earth, right? The most difficult. And I'll tell you why, because it's the only job in the world that requires you to do things that are innately diametrically opposed to human nature, right? Nobody wants to be told no 100 times a day.
Oh yeah.
Nobody
Oh
wants to
yeah.
be right made to feel like they're a pain in the ass. Nobody wants to be made to feel like somehow they're a con artist, right? Or a shyster, or they're just trying to sit, right? Like these are things,
Mm-hmm.
right, that salespeople have to deal with every day, right? You know, look, when you get a phone call from a salesperson and it's an inopportune time, right? What are the emotions that are elicited? I don't like it,
Yeah.
right?
It's like
You
I'm in the
know,
middle of something. I appreciate your call, bud, but gotta go. Yeah.
yeah, but you gotta go. Who in the right mind wants to do that,
Right.
right? Like who wants to be the person that is associated with, again, being a pain in the ass, right? Being a shyster, right? Not being technical, right? I just want to make the sale. When children are growing up, look, myself as well, right? Children, they want to be an astronaut. They want to be a fireman. They want to be a police officer. They want to be a doctor. They want to be a lawyer, right? All of those professions and beyond. They want to be a teacher, have something in common. They help people. I've never heard a 7-year-old in my life say, I want to grow up and be a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
Never, right? It's just, again, it is a job that, to be honest with you, Brian, and myself included, is usually a job that people land into by default, right?
Yeah.
You graduate college. I don't have a degree in engineering, right? You know, I don't have a biology major, right? Like, okay, what am I going to do, right?
Yeah.
You know, sales, right?
So is that how did you fall in by default? And tell me about that. Tell me
I
about
fell
that
in by
story,
default,
and then I'll
right?
share mine.
Yeah, after college. The only difference I would say, right, and you know, I'm not saying this right because somehow I'm trying to differentiate myself, but once I realized that I was in sales, and that look, I didn't have the skill sets to kind of run out and perform, you know, open heart surgery on somebody, right? That I made it a point to be the best salesperson that I could be, right? To actually start treating it like a profession and understanding the psychology of sales, understanding the mathematics of sales, right? So, right, look, when you start getting into sales leadership positions, you see a lot of salespeople, you interview a lot of salespeople, and right, not everybody, right, has that same mindset, right, from a salesperson's perspective.
Yep. Hey, sales is, I tell this to people all the time when they come down on sales. Hey, sales is the highest paid profession in the world. Look at the leaders of every big corporation. Look at the highest earners. They're all salespeople. And everybody's a salesperson. Hell, you got to sell yourself to get out of bed. It's
Absolutely.
all about what are you willing to do to get what you want, right? Or to what are you willing to do to solve a problem? Or what are you willing to do to get somebody else what they want that solves their problem, right? So, and it took me a long time too to understand that. I mean, I got out of college, I studied nonprofit administration to save the world by, you know, running the Boys and Girls Clubs or something like that. And I worked for the Boy Scouts for a number of years. I took a job with the Y doing marketing and community development, and I got fired. Just got fired. I was too big for my britches. I wouldn't listen to folks who had more experience than me in that realm, even though they may have been wrong. I should have been smarter with my people skills. There's something else I was lacking. Right?
Brian, I got to give you kudos. This is the first time I ever heard anybody getting fired from a nonprofit job. So,
oh yeah. And I went to school because, I mean, when I was going to school, I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I thought I was good at art and I was good at sports. None of those were going to pay me anything. And so I met an advisor who said, hey, we're starting this new program, because I was trying to study business, but I was too ADD to sit through an accounting class. And then he said, we're starting this nonprofit business program. Do you want to get involved? So I did, and I loved it because I got to help people, right? Got to help people. And I saw results after all these little things that I was doing. So I got the highest grades in the class. Took me a little longer to graduate because I was doing shenanigans early, but I finished. And I did about my first 10 years out of school, I was in nonprofit, but then I got fired. And I started to realize my rose-colored glasses shattered. Just like other industries, there's political things that go on in the background and boards and conflicts of interest. And I was like, this isn't what I thought it was. And I didn't want to go back that way. So my best buddy who owned a small IT company was turning it into an MSP. And his mentor said, you got to get somebody to sell because you shouldn't be doing the selling. Right. So I just talked to him. Hey, I got fired. I'm having a cocktail. I'm trying to drown my sorrows. And he's like, hey, you should come sell this IT service for me. I don't know anything about IT. I go, I can sell a warm and fuzzy feeling. That's fundraising, right? And he said, do a phone interview with my mentor. And I did. And the guy told him to hire me. So I did. And that was history. But I started to realize a lot of things. And then things happened. I read books. I got around people who knew what they were doing, who had fruit on the tree. Not necessarily just people who were salespeople, and not really winning at it. And before I knew it, that was me, So, right. And then your story, you got a phone call from your business partner now. What was his name again?
Rajiv Kamal.
Rajiv. So Manish Thakur called. We had a mutual friend, Joe Johnson. He's Indian, but U.S. citizen, but they were friends from earlier. Joe, when I left my IT company, he said, a couple years, I might have somebody give you a call. A friend of mine has business in India. You might want to be bringing it here. I said, okay, call me. Whatever. I left, went to a different MSP. I jumped around doing a couple different things. Really couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. But I was learning I didn't want to be an employee anymore for sure. And 2 years to the road, Joe gave me a call. He said, you want to have lunch with my friend Manish? And I said, sure. And it was the same kind of conversation. He was looking to solve, he had realized there was a problem that needed to be solved. His industry was dying, but he needed to change or his business was going to die. So he pitched me and, right. And here we are. Right. So very, very similar type of trajectory.
Oh, I listen, absolutely. Right. It's amazing the twists and turns, right? That life throws at you, and sometimes it's for the best and it works out, and sometimes not so much. But
so if you're going to boil down your success, and I know we've kind of gotten off on a sales thing, but I really, I think subconsciously I want to convince people that they need to get good at selling in all facets of their life. And what I've learned, a lot of it is the art of understanding people, right?
Right.
There's a science of whatever you're selling, but the art of having good people skills. What if you're going to advise somebody that's getting into sales and they're struggling, they're spinning their wheels, and they're making hundreds of calls and they're talking to hundreds of people, but they just can't get over the hump? Well, how would you?
I'd say a couple things, right? And there have been many times in my career, talking one of my salespeople off a ledge, right?
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
I've always had a kind of a couple of rules. All right, break it down to simplicity. Again, if you're making calls, right, and every call you're making, right, it's because I got to sell somebody something. I got to sell somebody something, right? This is right. At the end of the day, right, again, that is really going to be a tough paper route,
Yeah. Yep.
But if you're calling people to have conversation with them, right, and be inquisitive, right, truly be inquisitive, want to learn, right, about your prospect or your potential customer in ways that you may be able to help them, right? It kind of takes the edge off a little bit, mm-hmm. right? Because mm-hmm. you're not going in, right? I'm not going in to call with Brian where within 30 seconds, Brian is figuring out within 5 seconds that, the only reason why I'm picking up the phone to call you is to sell you something,
yep.
right? The other thing is that for me personally, it's always been important to really kind of believe in what you're representing.
Oh, absolutely. You have to be all in.
Yeah. I've always asked myself, right, a question. If I'm going out to meet a customer, right, or we're looking to, propose a solution or a product or a service, I ask myself a question. Would I buy this myself?
If I was sitting there, would
right.
I buy
right.
it for sure?
Would I buy that? And if the answer is yes, then, right, without even thinking about it, you can have conversations with passion, right? And
Mm-hmm.
people can read that, right? And again, if you're taking an interest in trying to solve a problem, right, or overcome a challenge or get a customer from point A to point B, right? Uh, right, you're not going in trying to sell a used car, right, to
Mm-hmm.
somebody you're never gonna see again, right? You're kind of creating that relationship. The other thing again, right? There is, I think there is uh, an innate thought process that, like, if I'm working for a company, I've got to go out and I've got to go out and pitch their ware. I got to go out and pitch their wares, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, again, right? Pitching is for infomercials, right? When you got 30 seconds, right, to kind of get your value add across
Right.
and
Right.
catch
Yeah.
somebody's attention.
Yeah.
Um, there's no need, again, there's no need to pitch. Just be a human being, right? Be inquisitive,
Yeah.
right? Look to have conversations with people, and truly look to be inquisitive. No, I'm not asking you a question just because, right? Somebody gave me a list of questions that I have to ask. I'm asking you a question because I'm really curious, right?
Yep. Yep.
I'm really curious how you deal with this situation. I'm really curious on how you've tried to overcome this problem.
Yep.
So
That's a very similar approach, that I like to take. I think it's almost probably the same. We just probably use different words. It's really
right,
just going in and not looking to sell you something you don't want, need, or can't afford, but I'm
right,
looking to find out if there's a problem that you're having that you need solutions to, and if there might be a fit between us. If there is, awesome. If there's not,
right.
that's okay. At the worst, we've just made ourselves new friends, right? And I can point you in a great direction or vice versa, right? So that's kind of it.
Brian, I can't count the amount of times that I've, right. You tell people, listen, I can't solve your problem. I don't have a solution. This is what I do, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But if you have a need or somebody, right, where I can help, people appreciate honesty, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where the proverbial trusted advisor comes in, right? Like, if I can trust you to do, right, things that are in my best interest, right, and not to jam something down my throat that's not going to help, that's going to cost me money, that's going to put me in a worse position than I'm already in now, right? Generally things work out in the long term. There's been plenty of people that have not bought off of me, right, in the moment, but years later, right, because you've continued a relationship where they've called you back and said, hey, right, right, I trust in what you're saying. Not that you're never wrong, right? But I trust that your intentions are always good to, right? To be of assistance, of help.
There's this principle that I learned years ago: is be willing to go the extra mile for somebody and serve them before you're ever looking for something in return. You might not ever give it, and that's okay, because you'll find it somewhere else, right?
Absolutely.
So it's huge. I always want to find out if there's not something with a fit that I can do. There might be somebody that I know that I've come across, or how can I do you a favor to get you to that point?
Absolutely.
Because they're going to remember about it. Might not ever work with me, but they're definitely having conversations about people. Hey, I met this guy the other day and learned a little bit about their company, and we weren't a fit, but I think you might be, right?
Absolutely. There's no question about that, Brian, right? I mean, it's the right approach. And I don't care what industry you are, right? Industries tend to be small communities. So even from a technology perspective, right? The industry's small, right? You run into people. I would say, be careful who you treat poorly, because they may end up being your boss one day.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And here's something else I hope people pick up on from this conversation is so many people get stuck in the mud, especially in sales or in anything, especially at a young age. And sometimes you stop 3 feet of gold and you quit and you move a different direction and you are almost there. Like, you don't know I look at your story. You don't know how in a few years from now or a few months from now, someone that you met or that you worked with in the past that saw the type of person, saw what you could do, maybe never even said something to you about it, picks up the phone and calls you and said, hey, I got this unbelievable idea about how we're going to take AI into the future and help businesses. I want you to come on board with me because I've seen what you can do and I want that with me. Right? You just don't know that. And so it's hard when you're in the thick of it and you're struggling with, with your quotas or with your life or that, to see that kind of that possibility. But I just want to hope people are encouraged by learning and hearing your story of how like all these kind of things shift and change and you never know where you're going to end up being.
Yeah, it's funny from a sales management or sales leadership perspective. Again, when you're working for companies and large corporations, a lot of times, right, there is a lot of pressure on the results. Right? What are the results? My focus has always been on the behavior, right, as opposed to the results. Right? That because again, sales is a tough job, right? I've never been a big Tony Robbins motivational guy, right? But there are some things, right, that you pick up, right?
Sure.
Guy Zig Ziglar, right, used to say
mindsets are important. Yeah. Activity,
right?
Behavior. Yeah.
Behavior, your motivation, a salesperson's motivation can be directly attributed, right, or tied to their last sale, right? So I haven't sold anything in a little while.
Go back and look at the behaviors, the activities, right?
Go back and look at the behaviors. The right behaviors always lead to the right results. And then it also, right, there's a mathematical component to sales, right? That, right, in theory, if I flip a coin, I got 50% chance it comes up heads, 50% chance it comes up tails. If I flip that coin 10 times, it doesn't come up heads, tails, heads, tails.
It doesn't.
Right?
Yep.
That same thing
do
with
it enough
sales.
to get the high percentage. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing with sales. At the end of the day, right? I may have the right behavior. It doesn't, right? It's not producing.
Yep.
But at some point, so long as I continue to do the right things on a daily basis, right, it will pay off, right? And you will start making right? You will start closing deals.
Right.
You just got to ride through the storms. It's always the people. Ironically, Brian, I'm sure you work with a lot of folks like this in the past. I've worked with a lot of really good salespeople that have gone through periods, right, where they've struggled, right, bad luck, right, whatever the case may be, right, the customers that they have or the prospects, economic conditions, internal, external factors, and I've also worked with really bad people that. You look and they're going to President's Club.
Yeah.
Right? Just because they ended up with the right accounts or they're just in the right time at the right place. But those situations don't last for eternity. Right. Again, the biggest, right, if I could give any advice to somebody looking to go into sales, discipline. Right, is probably one of the biggest. Is probably one of the biggest things that you need to bring to the table. The discipline to do things right, even if they're not paying results immediately, to continue to do them. Right. So,
all right, we're gonna wrap that up and put a bow in it and tell everybody. I agree.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. You got to be disciplined. It's one of the hardest things to do. And another thing is one of the things I'd add to it is have a doesn't matter mindset, right? Because that's how you get over the nose. No, I don't want to. Okay, that's fine. Doesn't matter. I'm moving on. Next.
Not personal.
Who's next? Not personal. Yep. It's not that I don't like you.
Right.
I'm busy. I got something going on. I can't afford whatever. But okay, next. Who's next? Who's next? Who's next? Because there's someone out there. Cool. What are some of the hobbies you have? What do you like to do? Do you follow sports? Do you get out in the outside? What are you doing for fun when you're not selling?
If you look over my shoulder, right, you'll see a lot of pictures of horse races, right? So outside of technology, right, right, my I have a passion for horses and horse racing, so I do own some thoroughbreds.
Really?
And
that's cool.
Love the sport, right?
So a guy named Marty came on and he followed horse racing. I don't think he owned any horses, but what's it like owning a thoroughbred?
Yeah. So that's a great question, right? I would say that it's there's no greater feeling, right? Literally, there's no greater feeling in the world, right? When your horse hits the top of the stretch and you realize, in that moment, that horse has an opportunity to win. A gentleman who got me into the sport years and years and years ago, asked me, he's like, why do you want to be involved, right? Look, my athletic prime is well past, right? I can't at
Come
this
on,
point.
really? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Listen, I know my boyish appearance here is probably throwing you for a little bit of a loop, but I can't hit a 98 mile an hour fastball,
Fair
right?
enough.
I can't dunk on a 10-foot rim, right? Like there's no way that at 57 years of age and 280 pounds that I'm running a 4.40,
Right. You
right?
get that, but you probably still have a competitive edge, right?
Right. But you can put a horse in a winner's circle. And I got to tell you something too, right? That these are the greatest athletes known to mankind, right?
Hey, God made them like that for a reason.
When you have a horse that's game, right? First of all, the intelligence factor on these creatures are off the charts, right? And when it's race day, that horse knows these horses are right. They're born to run, right? There is an instinctual right. Game horse wants to be a leader, right? Wants to lead the pack, right? But they don't run for money, right? They don't run for right. They don't run for endorsements, right? Or the
pride.
next pride or sneaker, right? They're not running for the next contract, right? Like and contrary to what some people think, they're not running because they get whipped either, right? You can't make an 1,100-pound animal do anything that it doesn't want to do, right?
Yep.
They run because they want to win. They want to cross the finish line, right? Before the second horse, right? Comes by, and it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing to be around these animals, to watch them compete, compete with heart. So
that's so. Did you always just like were you a fan of the sport, and then you got into actually having horses and training, or?
Yeah. So, it's, that's another interesting story. I've always been, when I was little, uncle would, take me to Monmouth Park, right, in New Jersey. And, my grandfather, my father, my uncle liked the thoroughbreds. My father liked the trotters and the pacers, right? So you go to the track here and there, and, had an affinity, coupled that with, some points in my life of borderline compulsive, gambling habit, right? Right.
That's another show, John. We'll cover that in another show.
That's another show, right? But years ago when I was at Verizon, right, I worked with a gentleman whose family was in the business, and I gotta, right, like anything else, got to give a lot of credit where credit's due. And he was, third generation horseman, right? He was working in Verizon for me, but his father was a trainer, right? His father's father was a trainer. His sister actually is one of my trainers even today. And we would talk, and I would be asking questions, and came to me and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity, right? Would you like to go in and buy a horse with me, right?" And then the worst thing possibly could have freaking happened, Brian. That horse ran out of the TV screen, won by the length of the stretch, right? The first time out, right? And then won again, and then won again. And I'm sitting here thinking,
I can do this.
Why isn't everybody doing this? This is right. This is the easiest business in the world, right? reality finally hit me. But the truth of the matter is that maybe if maybe if I was into a horse and right, I could outrun it. Right, my passion or enthusiasm, right, for the sport wouldn't be there. But that's not how it turned out. So
wow, that's neat. Horses are amazing creatures. We can wrap this up on this. My daughter, who's gonna be 3 on Easter this year on the 31st, she has Down syndrome. And when she was about 1.5 years, we got linked up with a local program that does like horse riding and training and stuff like that. But they also do kind of therapeutic. So in our program that we're a part of for birth to 3 to kind of help her with therapies, they said, hey, let's try this. And we got her up on a horse with a trainer, and she wasn't scared. She like connected with it. And this horse, and I'm walking a foot from this horse, and I'm thinking, okay, you got my little person up there. You better be careful. And I'm looking at this horse in the eye, looking at me, and it's an older, very calm horse, all white, beautiful horse. And it's the weirdest thing with a horse. When you are close to one, they're such magnificent beasts. You can see like all their muscles kind of tensing and moving, and it's just innately you know they're impressive, and you got to respect them. And the historical connection between man and horse and all this. When I was a teenager, my girlfriend was raising a horse. She lived on a farm. I remember the first time I went out there, and I was standing next to her, and this horse was a male, and he did not like me. Like, he knew what I was all about, and he was like snorting at me and like making sure that I wasn't standing too close. But anyway, but this therapy program, we had to stop it for a little while because of some I can't even remember why, but the program had to move in a different direction, but they called us back. And so I think in about a week or so, she gets to start doing it again. And it's just something that's really cool that I think is super beneficial for her when it comes to being able to connect with something outside of her normal kind of social structure. And it's pretty cool.
They're majestic animals, right? And you see there's all sorts of programs, right? Especially for veterans and PTSD, right? Again, there's, again, the level of intelligence, right, that these animals have are they're off the charts when you talk about, looking a horse in an eye, right? Like it's almost right.
You feel like they're looking into your soul, like they're judging your existence, like, oh.
Yeah, right. It's almost there's a connection. There's a connection that takes place. It's hard to describe, especially for to people who have not been around horses in any capacity, right? Whether it be racing or whether it be trail riding or whether it be any of the other equestrian sports like jumping, right, or dressage. They're just absolutely magnificent animals.
Cool. So cool to hear the perspective that you have on that and the way it's kind of become a part of your life. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that, John.
Brian, you had me on here talking about my 3 favorite topics, right?
Yes, that's my goal.
Technology, sales, and horses. Right. I just spent the best hour, right, that I've had in a long time. I really appreciate it.
So are you getting on a lot of podcasts to kind of promote, or how are you getting around doing your shows?
We're here's the thing, right? Everybody wants to talk about artificial intelligence, right? If you could have a little conversation about the technology itself, where it's going, where it's come from, right? The risk associated with it. People want to talk to you, right? Yep. So, it's definitely been an interesting ride, and like I said, which is, fine for me. I could have this conversation another 3 hours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot we didn't get a chance to get into, but like I tell everybody, because I've yet to have a conversation with someone on this show where I don't think I made a good friend and learned a lot. I hope to have you back sometime because I think there's a ton more we can talk about.
I'd love to come back. And look, here's the thing, right? You work with MSPs, you have some businesses. All right, let's one of the things people can do, right? Our product, Comma AI, in terms of cloud modernization, right? We built out full demos, right, that are actually production demos. Well, take you through it. Let me, right?
Absolutely, that might be cool.
Let's show you what we built.
Yeah,
right?
that'd be cool. Matt, remember that. Let's circle back around to that one of these days. I think that'd be a really neat thing, kind of a different format for a show.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. I'll bring some of my partners on, right,
That would
and
be cool.
we'll show you and your audience, right, what we can do with generative AI.